Hello gentlemen and welcome back to World of Tanks with Violini237. Today, I'm going to be doing a bit of a different video. I'm going to be reviewing the entirety of World of Tanks as a whole, and as you can tell by the length and the size of all of the stuff that we're going through there, we are delving in basically to the entire game. That's why the video is an hour long. So it's going to be some advanced gameplay running in the background, and then we're going to be talking about all of this stuff. If I do drone off a bit and lose my train of thought, that's because it is like 11:30 when I'm recording this, and I should probably go to sleep, but I'm not going to. Aside from that, you can see all the stuff that we're going to run through there. I will probably timestamp all of it, or at least make it a lot easier to mark when I go back through and edit the video. But anyway, yeah, let's get on with things. They're going to be split into basically 4 categories here. As you can see, general vehicle gameplay mechanics, the progression system in the game modes, and clan-based game modes. So let's start off first with what I believe is just the tanks in general. So it's going to be different how I do this. I'm going to start off with the positives of just the tanks in the game. I'll talk about every single vehicle that's in the game as a whole. I'm not going to delve into each one individually because I don't have enough time to do that. If you want me to do sort of like a tech tree review of every tank that's in the game, I can do that, but it'd probably be a bit long-winded, and it's probably something that you already know. But let's go with the positives of the tanks in the game. There's a fantastic variety within this entire game, whilst you're not going to be seeing much of this in the actual gameplay that's rolling from these advances. In terms of the game, I think there's nearly 600 vehicles that you can choose from, and there is an individual tank and individual play style that everyone can have. You know, if you like to be active, if you like to run around the map like a headless chicken, you've got the wheeled vehicles. If you like to sit in a bush and spot vehicles or farm damage, you have the tank destroyers to do that. You even have the light tanks to do that if you want to sit in a bush. There's a vehicle for everyone, and that's fantastic about the game. There's a lot of flexibility. Not so much in terms of the map and how you're able to use it, but we'll come on to that later. Obviously, I've been through some of the maps in my map reviews. I probably should start doing some more of those, but anyway. So there's a playstyle that suits almost everybody. I don't think that there is a tank in the game that won't suit somebody's playstyle. Maybe... No, I actually don't think there is. Like, I think it's physically impossible. You've got the people who are camping, you've got the people who are active, so on and so forth. And in terms of just the tanks, there are very few tanks that cannot be used on certain maps. So, yeah, even light tanks can do well on Ensk and Himmelsdorf. You know, even artillery can do well on Himmelsdorf to a degree. But it's a very rare combination. It's a very niche area where you get a tank that you can't use on a map, and I'd say probably maybe below 5% of the time you play this game, you'll get that situation where you physically cannot use a tank on a map. But then that just comes down to player skill and just knowledge of the map. Now, negatives for the tanks, there is a insane power creep element to the game. This is evident in just the standard tech tree when you're looking at like the performance of the Jagdtiger compared to the Grill when the Grill was first introduced. More recent notes about power creep, you've got the Patriot was insanely powerful. It's actually it was very overpowered when it came into the game. Then the Defender came in. Arguably the 703-2 came in as well, the double-barreled version of the Defender. Well, it's not really a double-barreled version of the Defender, but that thing's pretty OP, given some of the statistics of its weaponry. And then obviously you've got the Defender to the Progetto when they redid all of the Italian auto-reloaders. The Progetto is just borderline overpowered. It may not seem like it, given it's a medium tank. It doesn't have fantastic armor, but basically what it got was a free equipment slot because they gave it a gun rammer for free, basically. Also, just ignore the fact that I'm like trash in some of these advanced games. It's just some footage instead of staring at a black screen. I thought I'd do something. I would show some ranked over it, but I'm pretty toxic in ranked, so yeah, best not to do that. Anyway, there are quite a few overpowered vehicles, and I'm not talking about stuff like the Progetto, because the Progetto can be countered, and that depends a lot on player skill. But when I'm talking about overpowered vehicles, I'm talking Chieftain, 907, 279E, EBRs, but then you have to be a good EBR player. RT is probably the most overpowered class in the game. It's been nerfed heavily with the artillery changes, but there is still that notion that you can still do stuff in RT nowadays, because the majority of these tanks, apart from the EBR, is just bash your head against the keyboard and you can do well. Like, it takes a degree of skill to play every single tank, but the skill cap is a lot lower in something like a 279, something like a Chieftain. It doesn't mean that it's easy to play, but any monkey can really play it. E25 as well is ridiculously overpowered. It has so many different roles, the E25. It can be a tank destroyer, it can be a light tank. It's actually probably one of the best light tanks in the game, ironically. And obviously the issue with a lot of these vehicles, aside from the EBR, which they can't nerf into the ground anymore unless they change how the actual tank works, which we'll get onto in a second. The issue with a lot of these tanks is they're premium vehicles or reward vehicles. So the Chieftain you can't nerf because it's a Clan Wars reward vehicle. So if they nerfed it, they'd either have to replace it with something equally as good, or they'd have to replace it with something that's less powerful, and then people just won't play campaign anymore because there's no incentive. And 279, they don't even need to get into that tank. It's just ridiculous. You angle that thing up a tiny bit, that's it. You're golden to bounce everything known to mankind. And as the issue progresses with more overpowered tanks coming in, there's going to be inevitably a snowball, and there's going to be a power creep. So Wargaming did well with introducing the Caro 45 ton for the Renaissance campaign, but I've a feeling that the next tank they introduce as a Clan Wars reward tank will be pretty powerful, if not more powerful than the Chieftain. And then that'll stop the 15 Chieftain meta that seems to be floating around nowadays, because you can see it here in this game. It's just Chieftain, 279. Like, there's one medium and two light tanks. Like, Chieftain is just meta at this point. I think the main thing is I've completely lost train of thought with the Chieftain. I can't remember what I was going to say, but what the main thing about the Chieftain was. This is what happens when I try and record a YouTube video late at night. I was on about EBRs. That's it, I think. Anyway, we're going on to EBRs now. Let's just ignore me having a massive mental breakdown. The EBRs are broken in the way that they have really weird hitboxes, and I will show a picture on screen, hopefully, if editing goes well. But basically, the EBR it doesn't have much armor. It's got 20mm of hull armor, it's got 10mm of wheel armor, but if you've played this game, you know that the wheels are insanely strong. And out of curiosity, I looked as to why the wheels were so strong, because I didn't understand it. Like, tracks can go through, and tracks are stronger than wheels. Theoretically, they've got to hold up a higher tonnage of tank, and they've got to support it more. So I did a little digging, and now I don't know what type of metal or how thick the EBR's wheels are, so I just went off the strongest and most common usage or metal that's used in alloy rims, which is aluminium. And the aluminium AA7075, the T7 version, which is a heat-resistant variant of aluminium, is the strongest. It's I think its tensile strength is 570 megapascals, and that is just insane. Like, 570 megapascals converts to a strength of, I don't even know what that number is. I think that's 570 million newtons per square meter of force that aluminium can hold. Granted that is strong, and they probably don't use that level of aluminium. It's like, that's not what they would use on a tank. Like, the density is going to be lower, and the actual thickness of the wheel won't be as much. But even still, if I go and look at the sheer strength of aluminium, the strongest type of aluminium is still 350 megapascals, which is again just insane. I think it equates to 1 megapascal is something like 1 million newton meters squared. So it's a pretty strong material. But then again, when you go to look at what a shell is going to be fired at and how the wheel is like going to be absorbing it. If you think you could even over like reduce that value by like 400-500%, like there is no way that a wheel on an EBR is going to be strong enough to withstand 570 megapascals of force. So out of curiosity, I did a little digging, because if we take a track from a 140, for example, we will look at the Chieftain, for example. I apologise about this commentary, I'm really losing my train of thought. But the most common thing that's going to be shot on EBR is a Chieftain shell. Now, I couldn't find the exact shell on the Chieftain in World of Tanks because it's not actually a Chieftain, but that's a discussion for a completely another day. The closest thing I could find to the L15A1 shell that the Chieftain inside World of Tanks uses was the L15A3. That's a armor-piercing discarding saber round, 7.6 kilograms, 1370 meters per second shell velocity. So I did a quick calculation, and it turns out that the force in newtons that would exert onto the armor that it hits would be 10,412 newtons, which is equivalent to fucking the armor up. I don't really know physics all too well, but essentially, when you look at the characteristics of the shell from that Chieftain, I'm taking this off the War Thunder website for any reference. The Chieftain shell can penetrate 370 millimeters of armor. Now, I don't know what that equates to because I don't do engineering and I don't do physics, so I wouldn't know the differences between the aluminium alloys on the EBR and the shell in the Chieftain. But if that shell can penetrate 370 millimeters of armor at 10 meters, I don't think a wheel on an armored car is going to stop it. It's not happening. And even if it does happen, by some miracle it stops the shell from going in, it's still going to create a massive spalling effect, and that's going to hit the tank. And if the spall doesn't go through the tank, then the inside of the ammo will spall too, because it's only an armoured car. So what I'm essentially saying in a more convoluted way to try and sound intelligent is the ammo on EBRs is bullshit, really. It's nigh on impossible for that thing to withstand a shot, or just any tank round. Anything from, I'd say, 76 millimeters and up. A 57 millimeter might be a bit touch and go depending on the distance, because the Russian 75 millimeters are pretty light, and they're not really an absolute slug of a round. But EBR at tier 10, it's fighting against 140s that are coming out at 500 meters or 1500 meters a second. It's coming against Chieftains that's shell is 7 kilos. Even if you took the strongest aluminium alloy that you could possibly use in an armoured car, it's not going to stop the shell. It's just not happening. And if it does, aside from the spalling, it will completely cripple the suspension. And yes, it does cripple the suspension to a degree, but it doesn't actually damage the vehicle. And what's more important is slowing down the vehicle, or actually doing damage to it. Because there is a game later on where I get wheeled on the left hand side in an EBR 3 times. A shot just goes straight through 3 of my wheels, and I get into cover. They did no damage to me. I think that shot would have killed me, actually. I can't remember from the game. But that would be an EBR out of the game. Except Wargaming's way to make them balanced. I don't know why they added them. Honestly. The game is getting so quick. You've got CSs, you've got this new Bond Turbo with ranked, you've got EBRs. Jesus, you've got the Chieftain. The Chieftain is meta. It doesn't have the DPM of the Superconch, and whilst it has the turret armour, that can only take it so far. It still has a hatch on top. Now, granted, the Chieftain is a hold-down god and would rape a Superconqueror, but the only reason a Chieftain would do that is because of its low profile, and it can get into position so much quicker. DPM is pretty much everything, especially inside competitive games. So whilst on a one-on-one fight, a Superconqueror would beat a Chieftain, in practicality the Chieftain would destroy the S-Conch, Like, it would be a minute late to the battle. That's why you see like nobody using S-Kongs unless they play them specifically defensively. Chieftain's just got that versatility. I've gone on a massive tangent there. Anyway, yeah, EBRs, the armor is just stupid. Like, that it needs to be changed massively, because there is no way. Like, the values I gave there were like pretty bull and probably not worth it. But then again, you know, you're developing a round that can penetrate nearly 400 millimeters of armor. An armored car is not stopping that. Like, not even the armor itself, the wheel just isn't stopping that. But anyway, let's move away from EBRs and let's finish off the tank section. The last one we're going to talk about is artillery. Now, artillery has been considerably nerfed in this last patch, and I don't really understand why they changed artillery. Okay, I understand why they changed artillery, but let me expand on that point a bit more. They gave it AP, they changed its high explosive shell, and they gave it a specific stun shell. Now, I played 10 or 15 games in the Conqueror gun carriage, and I came to the realization that AP is useless. Now, AP may be a bit better on something like a 261, but removing AP from the equation, because there's too much RNG in that shell, why would you fire high explosive, the one without the stun? It has less burst radius, you get a tiny bit more pen, I think it's 20 millimeters, and you get about 200 or 300 extra damage, if memory serves me correctly. But with the stun shell, you're getting nearly double the burst radius, you're stunning an enemy vehicle, and you're still doing a considerable amount of damage to it. Like, I don't understand why they've added a new HE shell, because what they've done is they've just taken the normal high explosive shell, split it, and then said, yeah, this is a new artillery with 3 different shells. It's just overly complicated, I don't really understand it. So, my thinking was that artillery could become a consumable or a gimmick that only light tanks can use. Because one of the most frustrating things in the game is seeing your light tank run off at the start of a match and die instantly. Whereas if you gave light tanks everything that's not an EBR, so any tracked light tanks, if you gave them a consumable to use in artillery to put themselves into an artillery like view, then that could be some sort of like consumable, a bit like in Frontline. And that they could like lay down an arty strike or something, or 1 artillery per game would probably be more logical, except this artillery doesn't have a reticle and it has to rely on the allies pinging on the map where an enemy tank is. Now, you can increase the burst damage and you can increase the damage of an artillery shell to compensate for the inaccuracy, but I get it. I guess it's an arcade game, but still having a reticle with artillery is a bit broken, so be more reliant on your allies pinging where the artillery is. Now, I can't really describe this, but imagine a War Thunder artillery strike. You click a key and it lays down a strike in a certain area and you've got a chance of killing an enemy vehicle. Now, obviously this game would be different because the tanks here have hit points, but something like that as a consumable or a gimmick would work. Alternatively, the thing I just mentioned about having artillery not have a reticle, and it just, you know, it can blind fire. It still has that like center circle. It still has like a center dot, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't know when it's fully aimed, and it just makes it really accurate. So this is like calling down an artillery strike effectively. Alternatively, if that's too complicated, you just remove artillery from the game, which is essentially what they've done with this new artillery update. But yeah, those were my 2 thoughts for artillery. Removing the reticle and making allies ping locations on the map would make it more like artillery should be and actually is in real life, and probably make it more fun to play, I guess, but also add an actual element of skill to it. But yeah, so that's enough about artillery. Obviously, if you've got opinions, let me know in the comments below. I've also realised that nearly 20 minutes into this video, I am probably going to go and have to record like another 2 advances to be able to fill the time. Hopefully I can rattle through this pretty quickly. One thing I mentioned about the tanks actually is that at this point it's pretty far gone. It's gone past the point of saving. Like, you know, we either need a tier 11 and tier 12 for stuff like the 907, the 279E, the Chieftain, or you have a massive rework of the game, because it is a point where it's stupidly broken, and it is almost to the point where it's unplayable. And Wargaming are taking steps, but it's getting one or two broken tanks away from being, past the point of no return, of being a fun game, really. In terms of the tank rolls, then the symbols should stay the same, like as you have like the heavy tank, the light tank symbol, so on and so forth. But the thing that is mostly frustrating is the way that the XP is given out. Now, I might touch on this a bit later when I talk about the experience mechanics in the game. But there should be a form of compensation for playing different classes of vehicles. And by that I mean... how would I mean? Okay, so compensation. Imagine you've got a light tank and a tank destroyer on a team. Okay? You say you've got an allied EBR and an allied Striv 103B. Okay? The EBR does 10,000 spotting, the Striv does 10,000 damage. The Striv shoots everything that EBR spots, okay? The Striv has an absolute monster game. I mean, both of them have a monster game. But the EBR will get considerably more experience because they're spotting the enemy vehicle, which is fair enough. Like, the Striv wouldn't have anything to shoot at and be able to farm that damage if the EBR didn't go out of his way to put himself at risk to find those targets. Alternatively, the EBR wouldn't have that result if the Striv didn't shoot those targets. So I think there needs to be a compensation, because the whole point of a tank destroyer is to sit and snipe. Now this brings me on to sort of like the roles in ranked games, which is also pretty dumb. Like, I don't see like the purpose of having those certain ranked roles, but whatever, that's a completely different kettle of fish, which we'll get onto. But yeah, that's mainly the issue there. As I mentioned here on the notes that I've made, it should be a little like ranked, except you shouldn't punish a tank for not doing its role, and I will get onto this in ranked. So keep the old XP format, but compensate a tank destroyer player by 20% experience, 20, 30, 40% experience, depending on the type of tank destroyer that they're playing. If they're sniping in like a 268 version 4, then they should get like a 20% compensation. But if they're sniping in if they're sniping in a Striv, they should get like a 50% compensation on their actual tank performance, because they're doing their job. You're not going to expect a Striv to go and do a 268's roll and vice versa. Although it's a 268 version 4, it can just do whatever it wants. But anyway, that's the tank rolls. Next is the ammunition. Now the ammunition is going to be quite a big topic, because this thing really, really grinds my gears as a history student. The positives, there is only one positive, is that it's consistent. Consistently shit and annoying, but whatever. It's fine. Let's just get on with the negatives now. Honestly, I put consistent, I guess, because it's, the only way I see it's consistent is because APCR, or what they say is APCR, the special ammo, the gold ammo, if it's a form of armor piercing shell, its characteristics regardless of whether it's AP, APDS, APCR, and if it's high explosive, anti-tank or high explosive squash head, that's characteristics too, and that's consistent for tiers 1 to 10. So that's essentially what I mean by it's consistent. The negatives is the game is far too much pay to win, and I've noticed this with ranked. STB1, absolute god tier of a tank, sat on a ridge, you can just farm away in randoms. SConk 2 is not as fun in randoms, but that in the right situation, it can still have fun. Autoloaders don't really see a place in randoms all too much, but when you look at ranked, the meta for this season of ranked is Krangfangs, because you can't pen their turret. That's essentially what it is. It's a game of gun depression and turret armor, with a heat round from even medium tanks. It can pen the front of an S-Conk's turret anywhere, minus shooting the commander's hatch. Like, there is no point firing standard rounds in any game mode, because you're getting the same damage, and there are a few circumstances where this is different, but in the 140 here, for example, I can choose to fire APCR. Now I get better shell velocity for sniping EBRs and the sides of chieftains, but why would I fire that when I'm in a brawl engagement? Because it gives me no benefit. Like, I have so much Like, I have a much better advantage. I have like 80 more millimeters of penetration when I fire heat, and I do the same damage. And this brings me on to my point that the changes in the ammunition, they need to differ. And now I've taken a lot of inspiration from my points, or at least making this video, I've jumped kind of on the bandwagon of Skill's video on why you shouldn't pay for this game, and Kem's video in response to that. And I thought I'd do it on my own, and I'd dive into a little bit of detail. But what Kem said about changing the damage of premium shells is a very good point, and it's a point that's actually already in the game. If you look at the SU-100Y, for example, it has 2 types of armor-piercing shell. One does more damage, has less pen. One has less pen and does more damage, and vice versa. I think I said that the right way around. There may be a couple of other examples where that's the case, but I don't think there is one off the top of my head that I can't think that's prominent enough anyway. And my thought to this was, you make the premium shell have less damage. So I think if I look here, so high explosive shells will do the most damage, followed by the APHE shells. So APHE would be stuff like on the Chinu, the Cheeto, and this is a simple thing for Wargaming to go research, because they give the shell name in the actual, the game. For example, here the 140, it says it fires an APCR round, which I think is actually would be an armor-piercing discarding saber round, if I remember correctly. But it's easy for them to go research what type of ammunition it is. So APHE would be followed by HESH, Heat, APDS, DSFS, standard AP, and then APDS. The reason I've ordered it like that is because upon a penetration, high explosive will do the most damage, followed by an armor piercing with a high explosive filler, and then a HESH shell, then a heat shell. If that was in real life, obviously APDS is a terrible anti-tank shell, whereas heat is a much better one. So if I took the T54 and the 140, and I made the 140 tier 9 just for argument's sake, so the T54's armor-piercing shell, if it used 115mm, which is historically accurate, but it doesn't, so whatever, we just work around that bit. The T54 would do 350 damage with its heat shell and have around 200... Oh no, the T54's AP shell would do 350 damage. The heat shell would do between 250 to 270. This is because the T54 fired a filler shell, a shell with a high explosive, an armor-piercing shell with a high explosive capacity inside it. So upon entering a tank, it'll explode inside, which does more damage than a typical heat shell. A heat shell is for damage over range. But this means that obviously the heat shell would do less damage, 250 to 275, somewhere in that region. The AP would do 350 because it will do more damage in real life. If I looked at the 140, keeping its ammunition the same but at tier 9, the 140 would do 250 to 275 damage on its armor piercing rounds, but that would have the best pen. Heat would do 350 damage but have less pen, because the heat shell is better over long range but actually has worse initial penetration. In the game it's wrong. Our kinetic shells start off with the better penetration, or only on a few rare occasions it doesn't. But then heat retains the penetration over distance. If you take, say, a Soviet main battle tank that can fire heat as its secondary shell, and like armor piercing, discarding saber fin stabilized as its primary shell, they would typically use the AP shell over short distances because it's a better anti-tank shell. Heat is good in the way that it can take things out at long range, but it doesn't. I get too much into the War Thunder side of this. Heat is very good at taking things out specifically unless it hits ammunition, is what I'm saying. If you've ever played War Thunder and you fire you know the difference between the shells, then this is pretty simple to work out. But what I'm saying here is Wargaming needs to look at the shells that a tank fires. If a tank has 2 types of AP shell, it has like the Cheery, for example, it doesn't fire an APCR round as its premium, it has 2 APHE rounds. The first one can do X amount of damage with X amount of pen. The second one can do more damage but have less pen, or vice versa. That's essentially the point I'm getting off at, because You can't take a tank that has amazing penetration and keep the damage the same. It's just not fair. Now, this could impact gameplay a lot, but if you're smart and with the new intuition rework, the good players will understand it a lot more. And it stops people spamming the 2 key, which is a major issue inside the game. And as I said, it's a very simple fix, because you look at the shell and you go, right, well, this heat shell will do less damage than my armor piercing high explosive shell, because that's how it works in real life. But alternatively, I get better penetration. It's a good trade. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It works fine in War Thunder. Like, you don't see people spamming heat shells all the time because they got the best pen. People fire standard conventional armor piercing. Just look at the M46 pattern, the Tiger variant. I think I did a video on my channel years ago now, playing that tank. It fires a M82 high explosive armor piercing shell and a heat shell at the same time. The latter does more damage, whereas the former does better, like, it's better performing over range. So I'm going off on a massive tangent here. The other thing I would suggest about this is you increase the penetration on some tanks, not all of them. Like, you don't need to increase the penetration on something like a Striv, but you do on the Chiri. You increase the penetration by 5 to 20%, because you need a tiny bit of compensation if you're going to remove damage off of your higher penetrating shot. So maybe buff the penetrations a little. Even though armor's pretty irrelevant at this point, I guess it doesn't matter all too much. Also, the thing that also really, really annoys me is the S-Conks ammunition. Like, the S-Conk is so underwhelming to me, and I despise it with a passion, because it doesn't actually feel like an upgrade from the Tier 9 Conqueror to the Tier 10. Yes, it has better DPM and you get better armor, but you're also really slow, you're immobile, and your shell has the same characteristics. The actual shot that this used, an armor-piercing discarding saber round, had well over 300mm of penetration. Why doesn't the premium shell get that? Like, why can't its DPM be buffed a little bit? Why can't its pen be increased so it actually, performs as it should, as it historically did? Because the British 120mm, not just on this, but also on the Chieftain, were renowned for slaughtering stuff at long range. It's what they were good at, because they had rifling. So why isn't it like that in the game? Buff the S-Conk, please, Wargaming. That would make me very happy. Until I get a Chieftain, in which case I would never play the S-Conk ever again. But yes, that was my point. Make the S-Conks premium ammo is standard ammo, then it actually has an edge over the Chieftain. Shells are an easy fix. RT shells I touched on previously. Honestly, if you're going to play RT, unless it's extremely accurate, don't take AP rounds, don't take the high explosive rounds, just take the sun rounds. Right, simple. You don't really need to change that. Before I move on to the equipment, actually, one thing I did think about artillery, to improve it massively, is you make it more a tactical class. Because previously artillery would slap you with an armor piercing shell, take off all your health, and that would be it. And then they changed it to slapping you with a HE shell, and that would be it. Now they've changed it so that it does nothing. It had a point where it would stun you over and over and over and over again, and you would just want to throw your keyboard out your window. And now RT is just shit. They haven't found a middle ground for it. Well, my suggestion is make it tactical. So you keep the stun shell, and you give it smoke and illumination rounds. Now, illumination rounds would be difficult. You do get illumination mortar rounds nowadays, but artillery didn't get that in World War II. This game's realistic. Fuck off. It can have whatever. We literally have an assault tank destroyer that goes 55 kilometers an hour, has more armor than a fucking mouse and Type 5 Heavy put together, and has no frontal weak spots. Talking about the 268 version 4. This game is not based on realism. It should be fun and enjoyable, and as much as I hate artillery players, they need a little bit of a buff. They need a little bit of love, and giving it a smoke shell would give you a lot of experience, because it would boost. You could hide group of friendly tanks, obviously the smoke shell would work on a blaster radius like a high explosive shell. And, you know, ships, artillery, use smoke shells. We have smoke hand grenades. It's not difficult to devise something or just imagine something up, like they've done with like 400 of the tanks in this game. Look at the 705A and this game's version of the 279. But yeah, smoke round would conceal enemy tanks. They would get plus 50 to 70% concealment depending on their vehicle, and you would get experience for concealing them, and the game would work it out essentially through bushes. Like, it would just essentially, the smoke would be another version of the bush mechanic, which is fine. You know, they already have that as a simple implication or implementation to the game. And then you could add an illumination round, which would basically work as a CVS on steroids. You know, right now I could fire an illumination shell, spot that leopard with an artillery, or spot that Nino in the corner with an illumination round, and then I could put some smoke on him to blind him. That would allow our allies to advance, and it would stop him spotting. Basically, like, they have this technology in World of Warships with the recon planes, with the smoke generators. It's not hard. Like, I know Wargaming likes their Control-C and Control-V for all of their Russian Tier 8 premiums, so why couldn't they just do that with World of Warships and bring smoke and illumination shells over to this game? I honestly would play artillery more then, because I don't feel like I'm just mindlessly clicking. You know, I miss a shot in an artillery, and it's annoying because I've got to wait 40 seconds to reload, but if I can cover an area in smoke, it feels like I would do more. And even if it's just the feeling of doing more, but whatever. Moving on to equipment. Equipment's been improved massively with Equipment 2.0, and it's a good step in the right direction for wargaming. However, they need to get rid of the special slots, because on some of them, yeah, it's fine. Like, the vents are just a generic thing that every tank can use, and sometimes it's not worth it. Like, on my medium tanks, the slot you should have, or what you'd think, would be, you know, a gun rammer. Medium tank is designed for flanking and putting out insane amounts of DPM. No, it's a rotation. Like, it's a mobility thing. Which is fine if you're playing on certain maps and you want to use a turbo, but realistically you don't. Just remove the slot. Every player has their different play style. Some people will play their 140 as, you know, a DPM machine. Some will play it as more of a aggressive spotter, if that makes sense. Like, it's a difficult one to explain, but basically they don't need it. Like, I get why they've added it, but Wargaming really doesn't know how people play. Like, it's entirely preferential. Like, some people might want to add a HP boost to their medium tanks, but then not get the full benefit of it. That's sort of the point I'm getting at here. So you just remove that special slot, because you don't need it. It's not, you know, it's pretty pointless. Like, looking here on my STB1, I have a turbo as my first slot in the mobility section. I'd much rather have my gun in there, because STB1 has really good DPM, and you want to utilise that, but no. Same thing with looking at the Waffenträger Panzer IV, my loadout. I have a rammer as my, like in the first slot with the firepower section, and then I've got a turbocharger and a camo net, and I'm a bit, like, indifferent as to what I would use with that. I don't think they really changed much about the Waffenträger Panzer IV. You know, maybe add some binocs onto that vehicle. Then, looking at the E25, I have a gun rammer, camo net, and binocs. I would love to have a turbo in there, but I don't really have a place I could use it effectively. So, you know, just boost everything to the point where it would be special, so the turbo gives you 5 kilometers extra top speed, and then you can use it on anything apart from EBRs, because that's just pretty dumb, really. We don't want to be adding EBRs or giving them any more speed. So yeah, remove the special slot. We don't need it. It's pointless, and it sort of limits what you can really do with the tanks, in my opinion. Obviously, people have different opinions, but honestly, I think it's just a waste. It forces you into using something that you may not necessarily want to use because that's not how you play a vehicle. Camera net and binocs should still be removable. Like, you shouldn't have to pay to remove them. Like, you can take a camera net off a tank. You can also remove binocs from a tank because they go around your neck. It's really not hard. I don't know why they changed it. I honestly think it's one of the worst decisions that they made in Equipment 2.0. Controversial opinion here, all equipment should be free to demount once a vehicle has reached elite status. By that I mean, once I've fully kitted out my M4 Sherman and 3-marked it, and I'm done with that vehicle, I can remove all the equipment off of that for free, and I don't have to pay bonds or gold or destroy the equipment, but I cannot put it back on for free. That'll be an important, because you can't just chop and change, otherwise people will buy one gun rammer, that one gun rammer will go around 400 tanks. That's not fair. Once you reach elite status and you don't want to play the vehicle that you're grinding anymore, you should be allowed to take all the equipment off that for free once you sell it, because it's not hard to take something out of a tank, really. I don't need to talk about equipment anymore because I'm going to go on to loadout changes in a bit. In terms of consumables, we should talk, repair kits and med kits and manual fire extinguishers. This is small repair kits and small med kits. They should be removed. There's no need for them. World of Warships did it. They removed their premium fire extinguisher and nobody complained. Like, it was a good improvement. It's just, it's the whole pay to win element again. I'm paying nearly 7 times the amount to heal 2 crew members. If I lose 2 crew members and I've only got a small repair kit, I have to pay, I would have to wait a full 90 seconds to do that again. That really hampers my combat capability. Alternatively, I could pay 20,000 credits and be back at full combat capacity straight away. And honestly, I think that's just wrong. They should have it so it can heal up to 2 crew members and up to 3 modules. Maybe 4 modules, depending on the vehicle, or you just do it so it's a large repair kit and it repairs everything. Large med kit, automatic fire extinguisher, or maybe make the fire extinguisher manual. But that comes on to my next point: is food should come as another key, which would be will be your 7 key if you're keeping the default settings. The reason I mentioned this is because I was looking at the World of Warships side of things, and their consumables, whilst very powerful, as in the radar, the defensive fire expert, or the defensive AA consumable, is very powerful in the moment. It has a cooldown. So instead of paying 20,000 credits to gain a significant advantage over your opponents, why not pay 10,000 credits to have your crew eat some coffee and cinnamon buns, or down a cup of tea and have a crumpet for the British vehicles, and then for a minute or for a minute and a half their crew skills are boosted by 15, 20, 25%, and then they have to wait 2 minutes for it to cool down for the tea to rebrew. I think that would work, because that allows you to not just go, oh yeah, smack my head against the keyboard, there you go, I've got 10% better reload than you, I've got 10% better view range, camo, etc. than you do. But then with that, you don't have to sacrifice your fire extinguisher. But that consumable can be swapped out for something like high octane gas, which would be the only other one that you use, and you only really use that on CSs on mines, so it's really a moot point there. But yeah, I'd have food as premium consumable as like your 7 key. You're not using the 7 key, Right now I could be taking a fire extinguisher on my EBR, and I could also have food, which I could activate at the start of the game, run it for a minute and a half, and then when I go sit passive in a bush, it can recharge. And the simple fix around this is it says above players when each one is using it, so their name is highlighted in green, or there is like a little arrow that says it's boosting, that they're using their boost, and there's a timer next to it. oh, there's like a timer saying how long is left. So, just a little circle that's fading, or it's like going around in a clock, like a clock pattern. That would work. And I honestly think that would be a fantastic introduction to the game. Last consumable to talk about is directives. We're going to start off with the crew directives first. I don't think they're needed. And they're just... I don't really understand the point of them. I very rarely use them. I think I've only used them like safe stowage on my S-Conch, maybe firefighting in some cases. But what I think that they should do is act as like a crew book. Now, I like the introduction of crew books. They're fantastic. It helps you boost your crew. But I've got hundreds of, fire prevention directives lying around. Why not take one of those directives and add it to a crew that doesn't have firefighting yet? This would boost my... Say I have my 50B crew has a firefighting, like my commander has the firefighting skill, but the firefighting skill is only 52%, and I have 10 firefighting directives. I can apply that onto the crew that boost her firefighting skill by 10%. One directive equals 1%, or 5 directives equals 1%, some ratio like that, and they're used to boost that specific crew, or that specific crew skill. So I can't just like halfway through learning Brothers in Arms whap on a directive and say, oh yeah, this is happening. It'd be essentially like a crew book. Keep the crew books, but have the directives actually be useful, because I very rarely use them. In terms of equipment directives, I also very rarely use those apart from in ranked at the moment. On my 430, I've only started using the vertical stabilizer one in tune with my vertical stabilizer on the actual tank. I believe that these things would be better used as a discount, so equipment directives their frequency should be lowered, and one equipment directive could equate to 1% off a pair of binoculars. If I have if I have a reload directive, one that boosts my reload by I think it's like 5%, I could put that towards getting 1% off of a gun rammer. I feel like, or 5% off a gun rammer. I feel like that would be more useful and probably more economically beneficial than just having a case of who's got the most directives wins, because again, it's just not fair. For the people who want to play free to play now, the directive isn't really too much of an issue, but it's more the consumable factor that's the problem here. So that's consumables. Now, loadout changes before a battle have been hinted at in the Sandbox server, and to my limited knowledge of it, it is a step in the right direction. I actually approve of what they're doing. They're just going about it in the wrong way. They're okay, but they're a bit complicated. It's like Crew 2.0. It's just overly, it can be so much simpler and so much more effective. Like, if I go into a game in my STB1, say, and I have my typical equipment and shell loadout, I have my turbo, I have my rammer, and I think it's my vents. And I go into a game at tier 10, and I'm like, yep, this is a fine loadout, 21 AP, 25 heat. But then say I go into a tier 8 to tier 10 game, maybe I want to take a HP boost instead, and I want to take less premium rounds, because I will end up doing more damage. I feel more confident in trading. This would also work in stuff like Clan Wars. Like, I would be able to take say more armor piercing shells into a game, or more high explosive shells into a game, depending on the map and the enemy's lineup. It would work in the way that COD works. You go into a game of Warzone and you have 10 different loadouts you can choose from. No, I'm not proposing that you have 10 loadouts. If you want to make 10, by all means go for it. What I'm suggesting is you can have 3 or 5 different loadouts that you have selected, and during the, I'd say 45 seconds or a minute that you're loading into a game, increase the loading time obviously for people who have potato PCs like myself. When you're loading into a game, you can you can look at that and you can say, right, well, I want to take hardened configuration, a rammer and a turbo on my E100 for God knows what other reason in my my tier 10 game. But when I'm fighting tier 8s, maybe I want to take vents instead of the hardening skill, which increases my hit points. It's just a proposed change, or in a way that you have a minute to prepare for battle, but also you stay in the spawn as AFK until you've selected your loadout. And if it doesn't select within like three minutes, then it automatically puts you in with just the default loadout that you have. That would work perfectly. That would be a fantastic change in my opinion. It allows for so much more flexibility, because there's nothing worse than finishing off crying and cutting yourself over ranked and then going in with full fucking gold into a game, or finishing a season of Clan Wars and being like, oh, I'll play my Leopard 1 for a game, and going in with like 55 rounds of premium AP and being like, oh, well, I'm fighting tier 8, I don't really need like 350mm of penetration, but here I am, I guess. Something like that would work perfectly. I've also realised I've only got 17 minutes before this video runs out currently, so I should probably get a wriggle on. In terms of game mechanics / other things to talk about, when in a bush, it should say how concealed you are. In terms of if I was to go into one of those trees or that line of bushes in front, if the arse of my tank is sticking out, I want to know that I'm either 100% concealed or like I'm 100% in the bush. So I'm not talking about if a tank comes up, what the chances of spotting you are. I'm talking about whether you're using 100% bush efficiency. And it tells you whether that, like when I actually stop in a tree, it will just come with like a green, orange or red marker somewhere on your screen, like a tiny dot that says this bush provides, green would be a very like the highest form of concealment, whereas if I go into like a little tiny tree, say this like tree in front of me here, if I knock that down, that tree would give me maybe orange like camo. It wouldn't give me the most of what I could possibly use, and I want to know that I'm fully in the bush. Now I'm sure as an experienced player people will actually know this, but I'm talking for more the casual player. It would be easy to figure out. Obviously now here I know that I'm fully in the bush because my vehicle's gone transparent, it's got a white line around it. But for people who are new to the game or they just want more reassurance, could be a good way to have that implemented into the game. It should also be clearer which bushes and trees give camo. Like they should actually say, instead of like, they do have a list, and I've seen the list, it tells you every single tree, but it doesn't tell you which tree. Alright, there's millions of trees, and all of them have symbol the tanks, and they have values for every single one of them. But I don't know which one gives amazing camo, which one doesn't, so it's really a lottery at that point. Other things to mention, make sure the modelling for the ground is correct. How many times have you tried to snipe someone's cupola or shoot someone on a lower ridge than you, and your shell has, you can see the tank, you can see your barrel, pointing towards the tank, and it hits the ground, because Wargaming can't be bothered to make the ground realistic. Other thing, auto flipping vehicles, because the physics are terrible, and for God's sake, Wargaming, it's an arcade game. Let us have some fun. Like, I don't want to be driving around, accidentally flip my tank, or have some knob jockey push me over, and then my tank detonates after 30 seconds. Like, why 30 seconds? It's a tank. It can stay upside down for years, right? It's not going to change. Yes, you won't be able to fight back, but just have an auto flip, or have, even better, right, is a towing cable like they do in War Thunder. My God. Like, imagine, all the memes would be lost. I mean, it's mainly down to the atrocious physics of the game. Let's go back to fucking 2016 with Apple WoW in the grand finals of the Wargaming League. Like, come on. Just no, the physics are terrible. Talking about physics, the final point I had was maybe make the terrain a bit more realistic, so when you're going around on Glacier, you're sliding around like the train off of Polar Express. Not to that extent, obviously. I just thought it'd be a bit more amusing if you had some like fun game modes where the ice was made really slippery and you got to slide around everywhere. Always something fun to look into maybe with Wargaming. In terms of the next thing, RNG. Now this is a big talking point, and I hope I've got enough time. I should do 14 or 13 minutes should be enough to go through this. Remove RNG. That's... I'm trying not to talk too much about this, but basically remove the high and low damage rolls for high and low rolls for damage and penetration. Like, it says your alpha damage is 390 on an EBR. I don't want to roll up to someone and roll for 293 and loses me a chevron in ranked. No, I don't want to do that. Alright, I want to go to a tank, and if it says 390 hit points, I want to fire it in, hit the shell, penetrate, and know that it's going to kill him in a shot. And I don't want this stupid 25% plus or minus. You can learn how much your shell penetration drops off over distance. That's fine. You can do that as a human being. You can learn it. But I don't want to look at the side of a tank and go, well, it says it can pen, but then again, if I get a bad roll, it's not going to pen. No, that's not how my great-granddad remembered the war. He didn't look at the side of a fucking Panzer IV and go, oh, well, maybe it might pen, maybe it won't. It's going to literally inside him, but maybe not, you know? Who knows? Just remove it. Like, yeah, you've got to have some form of RNG in the game, but, you know, War Thunder has its issues, but one thing I know, if I shoot the side of a tank with a shell, and I know it's going to pen because I know the armor, it will kill him. Like, the only RNG is dependent on where you shoot him and how effective the shell explodes inside the tank, which doesn't matter in this game because everyone has hit points. Like right there, that EBR firing Keiichi, this is actually perfectly timed. This is huge brain video right here. That EBR firing Keiichi, there is a 25% chance that he doesn't pen that shot, but then there's a 25% chance that he pens that shot more than he needs to. Like, you could roll up to the back of a chieftain, or you roll to the back of a tank that has 76mm of armor with an EBR HE round, and you can pen it. Statistically, you can, because it's a 25% plus or minus on your penetration roll. Just have it normal. Have it at 75. Like, it doesn't need to change. Penetration doesn't change based on what God wants it to. It's not how it works. And yeah, that's essentially it. The other thing, get rid of dispersion, for God's sake. Like, yeah, it's an arcade game, but again, the one thing that annoys me about this game, or the one reason that, whilst I don't play War Thunder at all anymore, the one thing I applauded that game for is it's based on what you do. Okay, with this game, it's superior to War Thunder in the way that if you get snapshotted by a KV-2 at 500 meters out of render whilst he's turning the turret and moving, and he penetrates you for full health in your Cromwell, then that's not really down to his play skill. Yeah, he can lead the shot. But if you look back to that game on Fisherman's Bay, I was side of a 140 about 350 meters. The shell just went like so far left, it ended up on like I don't even know where that shell went. Like literally, it sailed right past him. With War Thunder, if I know that the tank is 400 meters away and I put his tank on the crosshair at 400 meters, I know that shell's going to hit. You know, I'm the one that's doing it. So my proposal was, you have very minimal dispersion and you have an aiming time. So the dispersion would be like 0.1 or like 0.005. But you have to aim your shot. Because with War Thunder, the gun needs to stabilize unless you're using a tank with stabilization. But in that case, that chieftain there could have missed me. But if he's able to if he's able to drive full speed, keep his mouse perfectly aimed at my tank, then he deserves to hit that shot. He can't just swing the turret around and snipe me at 500 meters because the game decides fuck you. I just think that's unfair. So the thing I've created here on the side of the T110E5, the green circle represents the shooting the side of him with, you know, say a 140. At 50 meters, the green circle is what it would be without, where like before the changes, that would be on the move. No, the green circle would be stationary, the red circle would be on the move. Obviously, you've got a pretty good chance of hitting him 50 meters away. But then you look after my proposed changes, you know, both circles basically cover a wheel. And if you can keep your mouse, you know, perfectly aimed on a weak spot of a chieftain, then yes, there is a tiny bit of differentiation in your shell, but it'll be maximum. You know, firing at 450 meters, the maximum your shell will diverge left is 45 centimeters in game. Like, I think that's fair. You know, the players should be rewarded for sniping a tank on the move and sniping a Chieftain's Cupola, not just because the game decided it to. And whilst this opinion will probably cause a lot of controversy in the comments, I think it's definitely a very, very good change that should be introduced, because dispersion or RNG like that is it's vexing at best of times. Like, how many times have people been one-shotted, like snapshot one-shotted by artillery, by ship barns, and then not being able to do the same and miss the side of a mouse from point-blank range? Like, yeah. It's stuff like that that's just really annoying to me, and it's something that you can't control. Like, at least with War Thunder, if you miss a shot, then you know it's mainly your fault. Like, 90% your fault. In terms of, like, aiming time should be kept the same. Now, basically, if you're fully aimed, you've got, like, a 99% chance you're going to hit that target, or basically a 100% chance if dispersion is either non-existent or just not there at all. Like, here, I have a chance of not hitting that TVP, but with no dispersion, I could spend 2 seconds aiming on him, and then like the reticle would come in and it would close, or we would just say that it's fully aimed. Like a bar that would come across your screen that would basically be like, you know, you fully aimed a shot, it's going to hit. If you're driving along at max speed and the bar is at, like, say 10% full, then you've got like a very low chance of hitting the target, almost non-existent. But if you can keep your mouse steady, I guess that means bringing in a lot more change in terms of the physics system, but they're already there to a degree. It just needs enhancing a little bit. Like right now, every time my shell blooms out, like this reticle here would be considerably smaller. Yes, my tank would be insanely accurate, but I've got to adjust that perfectly, or pretty much perfectly. I just think that would be a better change, really, to the game. Yeah, I can't think of anything else. I want to get onto like the next thing, which is to do with grinding vehicles, but I don't know if I've got enough time. Actually, I can get onto it and I can start again tomorrow. So grinding vehicles, what is my proposed change here? The game is far too grindy. There's just so much time wasted. You've got to play so many games to actually get through, to get to tier 10. And it's infuriating. And on tanks that are not competitive, like my the training review, if I've posted it yet or whenever I post it, I haven't played my second account. I hardly play my girlfriend's account because it's just not fun grinding for all those tanks. So proposed changes I would have is XP for the modules would be halved, and I will probably at some point put on pictures of the tech tree of the Centurion 7-1. A tank, to make that, to progress towards the tier 10, you've got to spend over 100,000 experience just to actually get the tier 10. And my proposed way of doing things would be considerably different. If I pull up a quick picture here, my proposed progression system in the game is when you unlock the T-34, for example, you get the tank stock. Now, I would personally remove the F-34 76mm gun because there's 4 guns you can use on that tank, and you might as well give yourselves the best one, like unless you've got free experience to use. Or you get given both of those tier 4 76mm guns to start off with, and you get to choose which one you want. But then again, there's no point in having a second one because the second one's superior. Like, it's just wasting time and people's patience, and that's why the player base is dwindling and people are quitting after not even reaching tier 5 and tier 6. But my proposed change would be you can grind straight from the T-34 to the T-34-85 or A-43, whichever one you please. Now, this will come up in the tech tree part of the video once I decide to look into that, which will be coming up after the experience mechanics. Well, basically, say I gained 10,000 experience in my T-34. I would then use that experience would go towards my next tank, that any tier 6 tank that I want to go towards, say the T-34-85. But say I wanted to make my T-34 less physically destroying to play, I would want to play with the 57mm and the improved turret. So I would spend 10,000 experience naturally getting the stuff required for that, and that would mean that I've lost all my experience and progression towards the next tank. In my new changes, it would be a bit like Armoured Warfare in a way. So 10,000 experience goes towards a tank that costs 30,000, but then if I decide to use that 10,000 experience, it doesn't actually come off the vehicle I have at the moment. So I've still got, a third of the progression done, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, basically getting new modules and progressing and making the tank more enjoyable to play when grinding it won't actually impact how long it takes you, because you're progressing in a percentage rather than using experience, even though it still says experience. So I hope that makes sense. I might have to. It might be a bit easier to understand once there's a picture in front of you, but hopefully it makes sense. In terms of upgrading the tank in general, there would be 3 categories. There would be a category for upgrading firepower, a category for upgrading mobility, which would include engine and tracks, a category for improving survivability, which would be new turrets, and communication, which would be a new radio. The thing that annoys me, especially about my next tank, which is the Centurion 7-1, is you've got to go through 2 guns and a turret to even start researching the tier 10. That's wrong in my opinion. My opinion, you should have your own free choice to spend 12,000 experience, if we're going to halve the experience required to purchase, new turrets and stuff. 12,000 experience gets you the Mark 9 package of the Centurion, which comes with the Mark 9 turret, the 20-pounder Type B, and the 105 Royal Ordnance gun. That way, the tank is less painful to grind, it doesn't take as long to get through, and people enjoy the game more. Stuff like that, like with the T-34, you have the 57mm package, or you have the increased firepower package, for example. So I hope that makes sense. As compared to the regular Tech Tree, it would be more linear and just faster to progress through. And that's pretty much it for grinding vehicles. Just make it faster, make the game more enjoyable. Now, she'll get on to experience from games next, and I'm going to go have to record a bunch more replays. So see you in a bit. So welcome back. I've got games recorded. It's a new day, so let's crack on. Let's get through the rest of this stuff quickly. The next thing I want to talk about is experience from games, and I want to talk about this because I briefly touched on it in terms of light tanks getting spotting, and the tank destroyers not getting as much experience as the light tanks, because I see that to be quite unfair. So as I said previously, there needs to be some sort of compensation for certain vehicles that aren't able to get as much experience, because if you want to effectively gain experience quickly or seal cover or pad your stats, the best thing to play are light tanks, because it's just the game bases its experience system on if you spot a target and you do damage to it, or your team does damage to it, that gains you the most experience. That's why tank destroyers technically usually have a lower experience mastery badge than say light tanks do. My way to fix this issue, even though it's not massive, my way of compensating this would be everything carries the same weight. By that I mean doing damage, blocking damage, spotting damage would all carry, say, if you blocked 5k, it would be the same as spotting 5k or doing 5k damage yourself. Because you can't really... I don't think it's fair to punish a light tank for doing their job, or punish a tank destroyer really for doing their job if they're not spotting a vehicle. And I don't think it's fair that heavy tanks don't really get much experience from blocking damage, because effectively that's helping your team because it's removing potential damage that they're taking. So there just needs to be a way that experience is gained through the stereotypical role of a tank destroyer. Now obviously this will change, the Stridsvagen and the 268 version 4 are different types of tank destroyers, but they're typically there for dealing lots of damage and picking up kills. what would be a easy way to look at things is take a 140 and a TVP. A 140 is typically either a front or mid support tank. It's a medium tank. It can definitely brawl, but it can also provide like decent mid-range fire support. Whereas a TVP really can't do that. The TVP relies on hiding in a corner in a little like crack in the map somewhere, putting down that burst damage, then running away. That's how a TVP is paid. A TVP relies on people spotting targets for it and using concealments to keep its hit points to save it for the end of the game. Now, obviously, this would gain you less experience, so it's a bit unfair, really. That's the point I'm driving at. To also counter the massive experience difference between a winning team and a losing team, I think the losing team should get between 50 and 75%. I'm probably leaning towards more 75% of the experience of the winning team. So if a tank does 10,000 damage and no spotting, no block damage, no damage received on both teams, they should get, well, the winning team should get 1,000 base experience, the losing team should get 750. It shouldn't really punish you heavily for having a good game but being on the losing team because you're playing with 14 other people. But that would be my way of dealing with that issue, and that's just my general view on experience within the game. So nothing really much needs to be changed about them. The experience system maybe just needs to be buffed a little bit to help with the grinding. Obviously this could change if like the suggestions for how the tech tree, which I'll come on to next, and also the vehicle research is changed. You might not need to change the experience within games. It's just a very slow paced game and it sort of needs boosting a little bit to retain the new player base. So looking at the tech tree. Now the tech tree at the moment is fine. They've definitely done a good job in terms of reworking the tech tree, removing a load of vehicles and making them collectors' vehicles. However, I feel that there's a much easier way to go about this, and the way I look and the way I thought was good was the War Thunder way. Now the War Thunder way is quite complicated because there are like vehicles within a vehicle to research. So the design I'm going to put up now is say for example the French tech tree tiers 1 to 5. Now obviously they reworked the tech tree back in the day, so there was less vehicles for tiers 1, 2 and 3, but what I was leaning to would be each tank can lead to something of the same tier or anything of the next tier. Now this may seem a bit odd, as you don't really, say for example, the B1 would naturally lead onto the BDR. However, the B1 in this case could lead onto the AMX ELC, which is interesting. It's an interesting concept, but I guess that also you're not really losing anything through the game. Yes, you will see a lot less weaker tanks being played, but I'm using the French tech tree as an example because it is a very painful tech tree to grind, especially at low tiers. Like, I would love to go down the French tank destroyer line, just because I enjoy auto loaders quite a lot. But I don't want to play the Samoa 40 and the S35 CA. So what if there was a way that if I've played the entire French heavy tank tech tree, I could go from the BDR straight to the ARL V39 and not have to play the lower tiers? Now, this, I'm sure people's opinions will be divided on this, but it's a very, I'd say it's a very linear one. So like a tier 5 artillery could also go to a tier 5 tank destroyer. There is obviously the chance that people will just play all of the more powerful tanks of like the tier, so people won't play like the BDR, for example. They'll just play the AMX ELC over and over and over again. To combat this, I suggested that once a tank has been used for its research, so once, say for example, my B1 has been fully used to get to the next tank, or to get one tank of a higher tier, which would be the BDR for example, then the next tank that I use the B1 to grind for, say the S35CA would cost a little bit more experience, maybe 2,000-3,000 more experience depending on the tier. And this would change obviously as the tiers went higher and the more tanks that you played. So if you played the B1 to research 3 tier 5s, the second tier 5 would be 2,000 XP more than the first one, the third one would be 4,000 more. And this would stop people playing the overpowered tanks over and over again. And it would also, another thing to combat it, because people could just grind straight up to a tier 10 and then get other tier 10s for free, which I think is fine because you can basically do that with the collector vehicle system, although the tanks in there really aren't meta. But there really isn't much difference, especially if you're just a casual player. Now, the idea I was thinking is you can't play, for example, the AMX 50B to unlock the Batchat 155-55 artillery at tier 9. Alternatively, if you did that, then potentially it would cost maybe 5,000-10,000 more experience to play the tier 10 over the tier 9, because naturally tier 10 is going to get more experience over a tier 9. This also has a side benefit of boosting the amount of tier 10 games in World of Tanks and populating the pool a bit more with maybe some like non-meta vehicles, but also it stops tier 8s getting into tier 10s really, and it's an interesting thing because there's good points and there's bad points to it, because people will play really powerful tier 10 tanks and not touch the less powerful ones, and this applies for tier 9, 8 and so on. But then again, do people really want to be playing stuff like the Tiger P or even the Tiger to get to the mouse? Like, people could just play, the German tank destroyer line, get to tier 9 and they'd be like, right, I'll swap from my Jagd Tiger to my E75 now. Like, I feel that would be a much more fun and a lot more linear approach to it. It'd be simplistic too, because you don't have to commit to because once you commit to a tech tree past like tier 5 or tier 6, you're stuck in it. Like, it also helps out players that need to grind stuff quickly for campaign, because I currently have like 6 tanks that I need to get, or at least 6 tanks that are in short supply for the upcoming campaign. One of those being a Manticore. Now, I have the S-Kong at tier 10, but I've only got the Crusader, which is the standard line from tier 6 to tier 10. Now, wouldn't it be nice if I could play the S-Kong, get 200,000 experience, say, and then I could get the Manticore? This would also, as I said, populate the tier 10 games, but also it would allow you to grind tanks easily in competitive games. Same goes for tier 8. And I'm sure you would see a lot more people playing tech tree tanks in strongholds to grind other tier 6s and tier 8s and tier 10s. And overall, I just think it's a lot cleaner of an approach instead of having ridiculous amounts of... It goes along well with the thing I mentioned a couple of points ago about the grinding system, having to spend over 100,000 experience in the Centurion 7-1 just to get the tier 10. It's a pretty toxic system, I'd say. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Obviously, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. Next thing I want to talk about are blueprints. Now, blueprints are amazing. I love them. They've helped me grind so many lines in previous patches. But what I want to know is, or what I think could be improved about them, is they've improved them with the Coalition, the Bloc, the Union blueprints, and the Alliance blueprints. Good step in the right direction, Wargaming. I really applaud you for that. But there is a severe lack of national fragments, and this to a degree has been helped by the new Coalition and Bloc blueprints. But then again, they're having to cost more, so realistically it's not actually helping. It's just saying if you want to get a British tank but you've only got American national fragments, it's going to cost you like 10 more to get, which I think is wrong. It shouldn't, because you're saying that they're in the same campaign system, or both in Bloc and Union, whatever, but you're costing more. It just doesn't make sense. My proposal was have them based on the class divisions. So you could have light tank blueprints, medium tank blueprints, artillery blueprints. They would have the same frequency as national blueprints, but you could use them for any nation. And also lessen the number of blueprints required. Like, I don't see why it increases the higher up you go. Because theoretically, you are promoting people to play lower tiers more. If you think about it, if I can't remember what the ratio is, but say if you need one national fragment of 5 universal blueprints for a tier 5, but you need 3 national fragments and 15 for a tier 10, you're going to save them for tier 10. And because the lower tiers, tiers 5, tiers 7, are so weak because of the matchmaking, because of their vehicle power, it's just really expanding. It's further escalating the issue of, poor grinding system and a very long drawn out grinding system, and it needs to be addressed. So you can just lessen the amount of actual blueprints, national fragments, and just the blueprints that you need, because there's no point in making it overly complicated. Or if need be, just, I wouldn't say remove blueprints, but I'd say make them more accessible, for either gold, for bonds, for completing campaign missions, completing a certain amount of games per day. I don't know, something along those lines. They need to be either more frequent or just, it needs to be reworked a little bit, because you run really low on stuff like American, British, German, Russian blueprints, but you have a ton of Swedish and Chinese and Japanese blueprints because there's only like 2 or 3 lines within that tech tree. Yeah, that's my view on blueprints. Crew. With crew, I mean not crew skills. I just mean a crew for a tank. What I would suggest is either having one crew member, like World of Warships. Now, I will come on to this a bit more when I talk about crew skills next, but for crew, just have one crew, either a commander, and then they can have their own little spiderweb system, but I'll get onto that in a second. In terms of retraining crew is my main problem. Again, it's a lot of pay to win here, or just pay to progress through the game faster. What I would say is, instead of having your crew trained for, say you've got a 5 tank crew and you want to retrain it for your next vehicle, it's either going to cost you nothing, but then your crew skills are at 60%, I believe. It's either going to cost you 100,000 credits and then they'll be at 80%, or 1,000 gold and they'll be at 100%. 1,000 gold is not loads, it's maybe like £1 or £2, but it's still unnecessary money you need to be spending on the game just to progress faster. Now obviously you can reset the crew skills to boost it, but then you're just giving away so many games and so much crew experience that my thought to fix that issue would be, it takes a certain amount of games. So if you don't want to spend money on the game and you get your crew for free, they will be at, I would say, 90%, and it would take them 5 games to get up to 100%. Because the way Wargame is doing it now is they just look at a book and now you know how to drive the tank, where in reality it would maybe take a crew, a few weeks, maybe a couple of months to understand how the vehicle works. So my proposal would be, if you want the crew to get used to the tank, it would take 5 games would be free, 3 games would be 20,000 per crew member, and then 1 game would be 100 per crew member, and your crew would always start at between 90 and 95%, and all their crew skills would be obviously available. And I think this would just make the game a lot less pay to win. I mean, 100 gold, that's a maximum. 700 gold for a crew that doesn't, like, it's you don't need to spend like 50. I'm trying to think of an example I have here. I think the T69 and A44 are perfect examples. I haven't got a full 100% crew on those tanks, and I've played 20, 30, 40 games in them. And it's just a waste of time, and it's not an enjoyable experience, especially for new players. But whereas if you know that for free, for not spending any gold or silver on the game, you can have 100% crew in 5 games, it allows you, it makes it more bearable, is what I'm trying to get at. It's like, oh, it's only 5 games I have to suffer, and that's maybe like you just suffer for a day, and then next day you come back and you start grinding the vehicle properly. That's what my suggestion would be to improve that. Have the crews in the tank at 90-95%, and every game they increase. Well, yeah, every game they increase by 2%. Say they start at 90, you play 5 games, they increase by 2. Say you pay for a crew that'll get used to the tank within 3 games, they'll start at 94%, and then 96, 98, 100, and then for 1 game they'll start at 98%. That's my feeling, and that's what I think would be a good addition for the crew in general. Onto crew skills. I'm not liking the idea of crew skills 2.0. I looked at it, and it's going to screw over people's good crews massively. Like my Russian medium tank crew, which is the crew that I'm going to be using in this example, has got 5 full skills and is not far off. I say not far off, it's probably like 100,000 experience away from a 6th skill being fully completed. And the crew is the skills are fine at the moment, but I feel that they could be improved in a much better way. Now, I don't really know how I do this in terms of experience, but in terms of a different crew layout to make it a bit easier, the thing I've gone for here is you have 5 sets of crew skills. You've got survivability skills, which include preventative maintenance, firefighting, repairs, controlled impact. Then you've got the perks, you've got the vigilance skills, you've got the combat, you've got the mobility skills. You can see on the screen for yourself there what each of those include. And your one commander starts off with Sixth Sense and Brothers in Arms for free. Sixth Sense is, I feel that skill should be given for free because, it's an arcade game. If it's in the game for a reason, it's like World of Warships. They gave Sixth Sense out basically for free, although I don't remember what the equivalent was in that game. But they gave it for free as your first crew skill. Nobody complained. Everyone loved the update. Why can't they do it here? They get Brothers in Arms for free as well because they're in a tank together. It's not a Hollywood movie where, Logan Lerman is new to the vehicle, they all hate him, and then they all get like all buddy at the end before they all get killed. They have already a brotherhood or a sisterhood before they go into the tank, and that should replicate in the game. So either remove Brothers in Arms or just give it for a free, essentially, as a 0 skill crew. And then you can pay, and then say you want to go down survivability skills, that would be, say 20,000 experience. It could be based on experience. I didn't really give much thought to the general experience of it, but it could be based on games you play as well. But you can, I'm trying to think off the top of my head what would work here. If you wanted to go survivability skills, you have a progression system. That would be a good example. So mobility skills would be based on the amount of distance travelled. Say to start unlocking your mobility skills, you would have to drive 250 kilometers in game. Then you would be allowed access to off-road driving and clutch braking. To unlock those skills, maybe you'd have to pay some credits. Maybe you'd have to drive some more distance, or drive a certain amount of distance on rough terrain to get off-road driving, clutch braking, do a certain amount of handbrake turns. I don't know, something fun like that. For survivability, use a repair kit a certain amount of times, or have to repair your tracks fully without a repair kit a certain amount of times. Firefighting, you get it set on fire a certain amount of times. World of Warships, you get a minus 100% chance of detonation when you get the detonation award for getting ammo racked. For controlled impact, you ram vehicles, not for full impact, but you just ram them. Combat skills, something like safe stowage, get your ammo rack knocked out a certain number of times. Like stuff like that, stuff that you would need the combat skill for, is you have to there would be like a progression. So say, let's take another one. Let's take a vigilance skill. So situational awareness. What that could be is spot an enemy vehicle a certain number of times, say 10 times, and you're allowed to unlock situational awareness for free. And I'd probably say situational awareness of maybe 20 or 30 times, just for argument's sake, because recon is not as effective as situational awareness. But if if you've got to get 30 different spots on different tanks to get situational awareness as your next skill, there could just be a little bar that says, you've done it 30 times, now you've got the skill, and you don't have to start grinding it. And you can get, multiple skills in a game, and it stops players paying and having a good crew, or loads of crew books, or just loads of gold and experience dominating the battlefield. It also makes basic crews a lot easier to train up. I feel like that would just be an easy way of getting things done within the game and making the playing field a lot. Mostly this video is about making the playing field level and not actually having it as pay to win, because people who are have been playing the game for 6-7 years like I have are going to have considerably better crews than people who've been playing it for 2 or 3 years. So that was my thought on that. Next up is daily doubles, and this thoughts on this is pretty simple. You should be allowed to choose when you use your daily double. I don't think War Thunder has this, but basically, if you have a really shit game and you win, and you come bottom on experience now, then you will be wasting your ×2 for the day. And this is also massively within the whole grinding system of the game. But if you get to choose when you use your daily double, that will... It'll just be fairer. Or not even fairer, it'll just be nicer. It also... You can use the daily double on a defeat. You can have a monster game as a defeat and lose because of your team. Whereas, you could have a terrible game and win, and you'd actually probably be getting less experience. That's my thought on daily doubles. Premium account, it should be based either on when you log into the game. So say I bought a Dave premium account now. Realistically, I would only use about 8 hours of that premium account. I could maybe use 10 or 12 if I got up at 7 and then, spent 10 hours straight on the game. But realistically, who does that? That's not healthy for you, both physically and emotionally. Playing the game for 10 hours straight, it's not good. So it should be based on when you log into the game. Say if I bought 24 hours of premium account now, then I could log into the game, play for 2 hours every day, and I would have 12 hours. I would be able to do that for 12 days rather if I played 2 hours a day. Alternatively, I could 24 hours of premium account now would be based off of it would be halved, so 12 hours of premium account, if that makes sense. So if you were going to buy a week of premium, you would get 3.5 days of premium now if it's based on when you log into the game. Because you're only going to play the game for half a day because you need the other half to sleep if you're an actual human being. Now obviously this issue lessens itself the further up you go in terms of buying months of premium, a year of premium. And I guess that's a marketing strategy by Wargaming, but then again, you probably get more people purchasing premium account if you did it off of when you log into the game. Alternatively, and this is probably the better thing, a certain number of games for your premium account. So 1 day of premium could equate to 50 games, and these 50 games would apply for the next 50 games you play, obviously. However, the issue here that we run into is people who play strongholds. So maybe that 50 games could equate to playing clicking or going into a game of any mode 50 times. Although, that might not work for Clan Wars, but who knows. The same thing goes for personal reserves. They should not be based, they should be based off battles. I've got hundreds of personal reserves now because I don't use them, because if I'm going to start a 2 hour plus 200% experience personal reserve and I don't know how long I'm going to play the game for, because I might just have one bad game and go, screw it, I don't want to play anymore, then it's a waste, really. And I feel that if you based it off just the number of battles, so a 2 hour, let's say a 1 hour, how many games could you play in an hour of a personal reserve? Maybe 6 or 7. Like a maximum you could play 4 if they were all 15-minute games, but that very rarely happens, so you'd maybe get between 4 and 10 games, I'd say, with an hour booster. I think that's fair. It's just the same, you're just basing off the amount of battles, and obviously, you can come back the next day and not waste a booster. So that's premium account, personal reserves, blueprints, daily doubles, all that stuff to help with the progression. Campaign missions, artillery missions need to be reworked soon, because artillery is already difficult enough to get the mission done if you don't have a tier 10 artillery, unless you get a perfect game. Artillery missions need to be based more on supporting vehicles, not doing loads of damage, because let's say, for example, I've been stuck on SPG 15 for months now, and the issue I have with that mission is I've got to do, I think it's 2.3k spotting and 3k damage to get the primary and secondary stuff done, plus a couple of other things. But if I'm doing damage myself, I'm reducing the amount of assistance I'll get, whereas if I'm doing mainly assistance, I'm reducing the amount of damage I'm doing. Bit of an oxymoron, a bit of a difficult situation there. So I would say rework the artillery missions to be based more on, supporting your allies or doing a certain amount of stuns per game. This would obviously come into greater effect with all the reworks that I've suggested so far in the video. Obviously, if you're confused about how, say, a campaign mission might be changed with the introduction of a different RNG mechanic, then let me know and I can maybe do another video compiling and answering all of those answers. Also, with the missions, any mission that's RNG based, throw it in the bin. Honestly, why is there a mission that needs you to set people on fire? Come on. I think one of the missions I had for the Union, for the Chimera, I had to do something like 5 critical hits, or 10, I think it was 5 or 10 critical hits, which includes internal modules and crew members. And I looked at that and I said, well, that's a bit dumb, because that's based on RNG, no? Yes, I can help that by, aiming better or just getting more shots off. But after 10 games I realised I'm just going to go play my 430U with full HE. And lo and behold, it took me 5 games to do it. Mainly because I penned a CS on the side and set him on fire, and then I also penned an EBR with HE. But that's what the game, that's what I had to resort to, is spamming HE, and I hated that because I hate HE spammers. But yeah, I had to resort to that to get that mission complete, and I think that's a bit dumb. It's mainly based off RNG. The last point I want to make in this set of the progression systems is the economy, because the economy is a massive part of progressing in World of Tanks, especially with the cost of playing the game free to play without any premium vehicles. I'm not suggesting that they lower the cost of tier 10 vehicles, because obviously top of the tree is a massive help. Lowering, I'd say top of the tree should halve the cost for every single tank tiers 1 through 10 by 50%. Then people might play it a lot more, and it also doubles the experience you gain. It would be good for crew training, it would be good for progressing up the line, etc. My theory was that it costs a certain amount to go into battle. So, say I wanted to play my EBR 105 in a random battle, I would have to pay 20,000 credits, and that would allow me to enter the battle. But then I don't have to pay for the cost of a repair for the EBR. Because, if I'm going into a game now and I get instantly clapped in a tier 10 vehicle, I'm going to make a massive loss. But if I pay 20,000 credits, I know that at least I'm going to make, well, at least I'm not going to lose a load of money if I just pay a certain sum to go into the game. But ammunition and premium consumables will still cost money to resupply, but only premium ammo. So ammo, well, this would obviously change with the ammo rework I suggested, but I'd say premium consumables like strong coffee and ammunition you'd still have to pay for. But any repairs on your tank you don't have to pay for. You just pay a fixed fee going into game, and that applies for just every vehicle really. Obviously it will lower and increase the further up or down the tech tree you go. I don't know what what a fixed sum would be and whether this would actually work, but the thought I was getting at here is that when you make a tank elite, aside from tier 10 vehicles, when you make a tank elite, it costs, say your tier 5 costs 10,000 to go into a game. It would now cost 20,000 to go into a game if it's an elite tank. This will most likely dissuade people from seal clubbing. You're paying a fixed sum to go into game, which you may or may not break even on, and that's entirely based on your performance. Also, if you die straight away in the game, you're probably going to make a profit, because I don't know how much tier 10 vehicles cost to repair, but if you go into a tier 10 game, you pay 20,000 to enter the game, and you get clapped instantly doing no damage, you'll only lose 20,000 credits. If you don't fire any ammunition, you don't have a premium consumable. I think that's fair. The economy is pretty broken in this game. It needs to be a lot more like World of Warships, where it's really easy to make money. Alternatively, I did think about the possibility of it's like a betting system. So people pay a fixed sum to go into game, and the top person on experience would get the highest amount of credits, and then it would go down all the way down to the last person on the winning team getting just breaking even, getting 20,000 credits at tier 10, and then everyone else on the losing team loses money. Although that really doesn't address the overall issue. But with the experience rework that I suggested, it might be a good shout to look into that, but that would probably make the game a bit too much like betting, and Wargaming doesn't like gambling, do they? No. That's why we have the loot box system and the black market in the game. Yeah, that was my thoughts on economy. Not really a big issue, I would say, but I feel like paying a fixed sum to go into game would be probably better. Also a little bit more realistic. And then obviously it depends entirely on your performance. If you suck out instantly, you're only going to lose a certain amount of credits, however much it took you to go into the game. If you're going to do really well and have to fire a load of premium ammo, you're probably still going to make a little bit of a profit. Maybe not as much of a loss as what you would have if you lose all the HP on your tank by 100 hit points. So I think that just anything really that boosts the economy, even if credits is doubled. Also, paying to go into game would not apply for premium vehicles, because the whole point is to make money. That's why people play so much tier 8 strongholds, because even on a loss, if you do 200 damage with a credit booster, you're still going to make money. Now let's move on to the third section, which is game modes. So we'll start off with matchmaking, because this is a big problem in all the tanks. It needs to be skill based. And Wargaming do not sit there and say that it is based off of people's PR, because PR is not a good representative, because people can have insanely high PR because they've either played the game for years on end and played the team modes back in the day when they were around, or they're like a 1,000 WN8 player, but they've got 7k PR because they've just played the game for God knows how long. It should be based off people's recent WN8s. I would say probably the past week would be enough, maybe the past 2 weeks. That's easy for Wargaming to look at and make a decision. Matchmaking queues might be increased by that, but then people would probably keep playing the game longer if they knew the teams were fair and relatively balanced. Alternatively, you need to stop putting people who are insanely good at the game in bottom tier tanks, because even then they're having to carry a team of tier 10s that aren't doing well, and the likelihood is, you can't put a 3k W8 gamer in a tier 8 vehicle and expect him to perform the same as, a person in a tier 10 vehicle with the same W8. It's not happening. Each team needs to have like a relatively equal W8 like it is with hit points. It needs to be somewhat similar. And the only other thing that matchmaking really needs to be changed is the tanks need to be similar in capability. No more sticking a 50B against an E100 on Ensk and thinking, well, they're both tier 10 heavies, they have the same role. No, they don't. The E100 will clap the 50B every single day of the week on Ensk. If it was... It's not even a case if it was a different map, because, they're different tanks. If the E100 was against, say, an IS-7, then yeah, I'd say that's pretty fair. If it was against a Super Conqueror, I would say maybe it's fair. To a degree, probably that would have to be based on player skill, though. Random games, now, artillery limited to 1 per game. I don't give a shit about artillery's queue timers. That's your fault for playing artillery. Go actually play a tank that needs a keyboard. Matchmaking, obviously the same as previously stated. Encounter and standard battles are fine. Nothing needs to be changed about them. And the only other thing I would suggest is replace Assault with either a domination style game mode for World of Warships, where there are 3 points and your team has to capture them, and then a points tick, there's like a counter of points that are ticking at the top. First person to reach X amount of points wins. They have this in World of Warships. It's easy just to copy and paste the files over and implement it into all the tanks. Be a great game mode. It's better than Assault, where the team who camps wins, because the game is already, campy enough despite being insanely quick, but whatever. Alternatively, Domination could also be, or Assault could be replaced by a Capture the Flag game mode, in which you've got to, there are 3 caps along the the red line of the other side of the map. So, say for example, Fisherman's Bay, there'll be 3 flags, maybe one at K2, K5, and K9, and your team has got to capture those flags and bring them back to your friendly base, which will still be marked, or it'll be like a border, and you've got to get the flags there. And the first one to, or the person who has the most amount of flags after 15 minutes wins. Feel like that would be quite a fun game mode, or that might be quite difficult to do, but yeah, that might work. I don't know. It's probably better just to have the domination style. If Assault was going to be kept, it would, I would say it'd have to be like the 768 game mode. In terms of not actual 7 people like they did in the Wargaming, it would keep 15 players, but they would have 2 cap points that you'd have to go after. I feel like that would make it a lot easier for the attackers to actually win the game, because statistically speaking, the defenders usually win Assault more. That's why I've turned Assault off. I turned Encounter off because I don't like it. But yeah, that's randoms. Ranked, well, okay, I like the 10v10 format. I think that it's better not having... The only reason I like it is because you have 5 less, liabilities on your team. So yeah, that's the only reason I like ranked at 10v10. Obviously people's experience will differ on this, but the only thing that they need to change at the moment in terms of the actual game mode is they need to make it an encounter battle, because it naturally forces people to go to the point. Because what all the tanks players like? They see like a white thing on the minimap and they're like, oh, look at this. This thing gives me points and it makes a funny noise when the enemy's capping it that I don't like. I'm going to go stop them. And you naturally get more people going that way. There may still be 1, 2, maybe 3 mongrels that decide, no, we're going to go the other way, but that's fine to a degree. Encounter naturally forces more teamwork anyway, so it's better to have that. There needs to be more basic roles, okay? The roles in this game piss me off so much. Like, it's stupid. Why does a TVP have to spot its own allies? Why would it trade hit points? No. Just no. You don't trade until later on in the game. Let's take, for example, the Leopard. I would lose XP fighting in a Leo at close range. And what do you want me to do? Snipe on Himmelsdorf? No. I'm going to get into the fight and I'm actually going to go and do damage instead of waiting for either my team to die and I lose a chevron, or my team claps everything. I do like 4k damage as well, but I don't get, I only get one chevron because I'm not doing damage at long range. It's a medium tank. Do damage. Heavy tank, block damage. Light tank, sports. Tank destroyer, get kills and do damage. Artillery, assistance. That. How simple is that? For God's sake, an EBR doesn't get experience for assisting in doing assistance damage. Theoretically, if we look at it in a very linear fashion, an EBR that does 10,000 spotting, so there's 10,000 hit points on the enemy team. An EBR that does 9,990 spotting will get less experience according to its role than an EBR that does 10 spotting and gets 10 10 enemy tanks killed with that 10 spotting, 1 hit point per enemy tank. Because apparently in a light tank, or in the EBRs at least, its roles to spot vehicles, assist in destroying vehicles, and do damage upon its own spotting. Yeah. I wonder why the majority of people now are playing heavy tanks and medium tanks, mainly Crown Fangs. It's almost like they've ruined ranked and the game mode is insanely broken at this point. But yeah, they've expanded the roles. You don't need to expand them. No. You just, you give them simple roles. Striv, do damage, Striv, just do damage. Or the roles should just be removed, and it should be based off who has the best game, along with the new experience mechanics. That would work, because tank destroyers would be nicely compensated for doing damage at long range instead of set at the back of the map, etc. In general, in terms of the game, it's so RNG based on the teams for ranked that it's actually physically painful, to the point where I'm getting so frustrated and upset with the game. It's making me not enjoy all the tanks at all. There needs to be rental vehicles for people that don't have tier 10s, or people that only have a few tier 10s. I don't really have this problem. I've got enough tier 10s, but say for someone that only has 3 tier 10s, maybe let them have 2, 3, 4 rental vehicles that they can play. That would, allow them to get better use out of their daily doubles and potentially progress a bit further up in ranked. Alternatively, you could add lower tiers, but the progress takes longer. So a tier 8 would have to reach level 11 in the 3rd division. Tier 6 would have to reach level 12, and people can just play. You have to start off, you say, I want to play tier 8 for the 3rd division, then tier 10 for the 2nd division, and then tier 6 for the 3rd, for whatever reason. People will make money that way. The good players will stick to tier 10 because it's more enjoyable, and everyone gets to play ranked. Don't know how effective that would be, but I guess that would also allow the bad players to be filtered out a bit more, so it's actually a ranked, because the teams are not balanced in terms of player skill. It's so evident at the moment. In terms of the chevron system is, again, stupid. Why are you not giving the winning team, who are bottom on chevrons, any experience? Why are you deducting the final 5 players on the losing team for losing? I think, or my theory was, the top person on the losing team shouldn't be the only one getting a chevron. So the top 3 on the losing team should get 1. The top 3 on the winning team should get 3 chevrons. The next 4 get 2 chevrons, and the last 3 get 1 chevron. Then obviously the top 3 on the losing team would get 1 chevron. Everyone else, doesn't lose any chevrons. And then maybe the bottom person loses a chevron. I don't know. I don't feel like losing a chevron is bad, because you can have... I had an insane qualification stage. I was averaging 4k damage in my S-Conk and loads of damage in my 430U. I had a progress rating of about 120-130%. The next day I played, it was down to 70 when I was in the 3rd division. Because teams, like, I can only do so much as one person, especially when it's a team-based game mode. That's why I just didn't enjoy ranked. Next game mode are going to be the special ones, so let's start off with Steel Hunter. There needs to be a timer for the zones, because there is nothing worse than, you know, not knowing when a zone is going to appear, and then you're like, well, shit, I'm at the side of the map and I've got to travel like 7 million dark ages to you know, get out of this zone, and then I'm going to die. Also, the red zone, so the timer for the zones needs to be both on when the orange zone will appear and when the red zone will appear. That way you can plan more effectively, and it also stops people camping in a corner. You know, people do that. People just camp and let the others finish each other off. I also hate the fact that people join in on a 2v2 and make it a threesome. Not fun. Not my ideal threesome, not gonna lie. The zone, it needs to take off 10% of the total HP of the vehicle instead of like 150 hit points. Because again, I've seen so many games where Valkyries on 3,200 hit points just sit in a corner and they're like, well, you've got less health than me, so I'm just going to win when the zone kills me. Like, what's the Aliquin going to do? Go fight it? No, it'll lose half its health in one shot and it won't be able to kill it quickly enough. So the Aliquin, say, will lose 150 hit points every tick, whereas a Valkyrie will lose 320. And theoretically they should die at the same point, so then it becomes based on, you know, player skill. The radio detection needs to be available from the start, so you can find the severe lack of drops, which need to be increased. And also, I think at the start the Raven needs a buff or the Harbinger needs a nerf, because looking at it, firing heat, which is, if a Harbinger and a Raven come across each other, the Harbinger's going to win, like 90% of the time. Because the Harbinger can just fire heat at the Raven, and the Raven can't do anything. And it takes 20.16 seconds for a Harbinger to kill a Raven. Alternatively, if the Raven is firing heat to kill a Harbinger, it will take 23 seconds, which would probably double because you're going to bounce every other shot because the Harbinger's got spaced armor. If to combat that, you'll have to fire APCR, which will then take 26.88 seconds to kill the Harbinger. So either give the Raven more health, or give it, I'll say give the Raven more health would probably be would be better. Maybe make the Raven's health 1200 and the Harbinger's 1000, just to combat the difference in DPM. Because currently the Harbinger's got better DPM and better health. Like, there's no winner in that fight. It's obvious. Frontline, I love Frontline. There's a bit of disparity in the game. Sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's not. What I would say to Frontline is rental vehicles should get a choice of equipment. So you should get a rental T44 100, and you should get, I'll say, a rental T44, and then you get a rental gun rammer, optics, and turbo, let's say. Or you get a rental equipment that you can put on your tanks, or just equipment for free that you can put on. That's what I think would benefit Frontline, because people who want to play and gain money are going to be wasting like 1 million credits buying equipment to make their vehicles competitive. Team training. There should be no costs involved in team training, because it's training. You know, if I want to go into a game and I want to test a strategy for Clan Wars, I'm going to have to, spend money on ammunition and repairing the vehicle and my consumables to test a strategy that I'm going to lose money for anyway, because I'm going to have to play in a campaign. It should be free. It's training, for Christ's sake. It's the whole point. You can also test any vehicle in the game. Now, I got this idea off of Armored Warfare / World of Warships. You should be allowed to test any vehicle in the game. So I could go, right, say a new player doesn't know what line they want to go down the start of a game. They could be like, well, I might want to get the U100. But then again, I might want to get the Object 140. I don't know. I will play both of them and see which one I prefer. And then, they can just go into a team training room, or they can just go into the tech tree, click test vehicle, and then you can test the two vehicles against bots. That would be, obviously, team training would differ. But then again, you can just fight whoever you want to. Same goes for, next campaign, do I want to get the Chieftain or do I want to get the M60? I will go fight bots and I can win. Alternatively, you could have like a 5-5-5 against bots. They're literally like World of Warships. You know, you can fight bots and you can test your vehicle. In that situation, the bots have a difficulty setting based on WNA. It's pretty easy to do that. So that's team training, really. It shouldn't give you any benefits to it, apart from like a medal saying you've played 100 games of team training, well done, now go actually try and fight a random battle and see how well that doesn't go for you. Next is Grand Battles. I haven't played many Grand Battles, so I can't really comment on this, but it seems like they're pointless. As I put it, it's pointless because you're doubling the stupidity on both teams, essentially. The only thing that would make a 30v30 game mode is better is if you put it on the regular maps and it was more of a brawl game mode. Not the brawl game mode that's actually in the game, more of like a quick skirmish. Could you imagine 60 tanks on Ensk? Like, imagine the cluster that would be. That would be amazing. Like, come on, how much fun would that be? Think about it. What else? But on regular maps, and maybe double the ammo or have like repair depots. Or not repair depots, have resupply depots which can repair 50% of your hit points and give you back your entire ammunition loadout, but again, you've got to pay for it, because could you imagine the poor bastard that wants to play the Manticore in a Grand Battle? Yeah, no, that's not happening. So that's Grand Battles, not more to go now, and I don't think I'm going to have time in the remaining 6 minutes of this video, which is kind of sad. So I'll have to think about what I can put over at the moment. Let's go with normal maps. Allow players to blacklist more maps for no cost, because for God's sake, every map in the game is terrible. Like, there are some maps I like, okay, but it depends on the tank I'm playing. I will love Malinovka and Prokhorovka in a light tank, but I'll hate it in my S-Conk. I will love, Mines and Himmelsdorf in my S-Conk, so long as there's no artillery, but I will hate it in my light tanks, so go figure. Also, if you're trying to do a mission, you should be allowed to blacklist maybe 1 or 2 extra maps, just to thin out the chance of you getting, all of the city maps when you're trying to play artillery. Recon missions, great introduction. That's a very, very good idea, and kudos to Wargaming for doing that. To enhance this experience, what I would suggest is the most blacklisted map at the end of every single month is removed from the random queues rotation. Say Minsk has, actually I would probably say Airfield is the most blacklisted map in World of Tanks. At the end of, say, July, when I'm recording this video, if Airfield is the most blacklisted map in the entire game, then they remove that from the random queue, and in August, during the recon months, you can also play Airfield, and you can give your feedback on that map, and they can ask you, what do you feel is wrong with this map? It doesn't have to be like a massive essay, you just give a quick rundown of what you think or what you feel is wrong with that. Alternatively, players could briefly design their own map, because looking at the maps that are in the recon mission at the moment, they're very campy, they're very linear, they're all like corridor fights, and that is the majority of every single map in World of Tanks. It's all corridor fights, which is just wrong. They're not based on what the community wants, although what the community would want would probably be like a tank battle in in the middle of London or New York, which would be cool. If the community wants that, then fine, go for it. Just make it balanced. Ask the players what's wrong with the map, because then they'll give you an actual answer. To incentivize this, surveys should have rewards, and I'm not talking about just map surveys. I'm talking about surveys in general. If you do a survey without being asked, so one that pops up every few months, Wargaming should give you a reward of 1 to 3 days of premium account. Voluntarily doing surveys should give you 100 gold per survey you do, and this you do whenever. Right, so hopefully this isn't going to mess up the audio by adding a bunch of other videos. It should be okay. Obviously, there's no more World of Tanks replays that I can be bothered getting. So here are some screenshots from F1 2020 that I was taking the other day because I was bored, and I think they look sexy as fuck. So I've been through surveys, voluntarily doing surveys every week at a minimum. Should give you like 100 gold per survey you do. It gives you incentive, it makes the game better, you get rewards, Wargaming's happy, we're happy, everyone's happy. And have a survey about the top 5 blacklisted or most blacklisted maps every month as to why the players don't like them. You know, if I go blacklist Airfield, Minsk, and say Paris, why did I blacklist those maps? But the Wargaming, this is why I blacklisted them. You give your reasons, and then they can hopefully find a common pattern. If you're blacklisting them for missions, then you say. If you're blacklisting them because they're unbalanced, then you say. And the final one for just the game in general, about the game mode, is the test server. Not really a game mode, but I feel the test server should only allow vehicles that are receiving changes and maps that are receiving changes. If no maps are receiving changes, then you put on like the top 5 least blacklisted maps for the month where they take all the data from you. Because one thing that really annoys me is people just go out there and play shit balance constantly when there's a new tier 8 I want to try, there's a new line that I want to play, the tier 6 to the tier 10 vehicle, I want to try that, but I can't because everyone's playing tier 10. There should also be a few meta tanks at each tier. So for tier 10, if there's only adding in one or changing one new vehicle at tier 10, then they allow you to play the S-Conch, the 140, the Striv, the Manticore, the EBR, like 5, 6, 7 different tier 10s that are available just to play, just to sort of stop the matchmaking from being like the same tank fighting each other. See how the vehicle performs against different ones is what I'm saying. Everything should be available for free, including premium tanks, so you can go fight premium or you can go play premium vehicles. Test server won't really have much of an impact unless a new tank comes into the game, because if you want to test a premium vehicle, you can go do the team training, as I previously said. So only test server, the changes only really need to be made to that are in terms of the vehicles that are receiving changes or coming into the game should be the majority of what's being played. Now, final section, 2 more points to go. Competitive game modes, strongholds. There needs to be a much stronger focus on same elo battles. You know, there's no reason why, a 13, nearly 1400 elo clan should be fighting fucking GX. No, Wargaming, stop it. I did ponder with the idea of limiting the amount of reward tanks to 5 vehicles per game. Because when a team, Reddit, wins a game because they can field 15 chieftains and we can't, then, what's the point? It's pretty unfair. Limited to 3 to 5, reward vehicles. That includes Chief 279, 907, stuff like that. Forces people to play more tanks instead of just, getting stuff in campaign and being like, right, I don't have to play the game anymore. I did ponder with the idea of if a clan is fighting a team that can field 15 chieftains, then they're only allowed, like the team that can take 15 S-Conchs, for example, gets a little bit of a buff in terms of the damage per minute of each tank or the HP, but I don't think that would work. Maybe some form of compensation, but I don't think that would be good in especially competitive game modes, so ignore that point. As I said, it's extremely controversial as well. What I think would be a good thing to do, keep the Citadel the same in terms of, they have a rotation of each bridgehead, so the northern, eastern, southern, they all have the same bridgehead. However, what I'm suggesting is the clan is allowed to pick their maps that they defend, and I'm talking about any map in the game. So say I wanted to play in advance and my bridgehead was, my Citadel was mines. I would, say my Citadel is Malinovka. I'm not particularly good at Malinovka. Malinovka is a lot based on player skill or individual plays. So say I wanted to protect myself against that, instead of playing like Fisherman's Bay and Redshire as my defensive maps, maybe I would want to pick Berlin and Prokhorovka as my defensive maps. Just for an example, you can pick any map. Take Pearl River, for example. It prepares people for clan wars, and it just allows more versatility and more diversity within the games, instead of playing the same 5 or 6, 7 shitty maps in an evening, because it gets boring after a while. Also, I hope you're liking these screenshots. They're very, very pretty. The one after this is my favourite, just for reference. I'm not a Mercedes fanboy, but my god, does the car look amazing in the rain. So enjoy that in about 10-15 seconds when it comes up. Also, I suggested how you have a purely dedicated fun stronghold for grinding credits and tanks. No credits will be lost when playing this, no ELO rewards, no ELO will be gained or lost from playing it, and no boxes will be gained or lost. It's purely for people that just want to dick around at tier 10 and take, 10 ship barns. There you go, look at that gorgeous picture. Yeah, it's for people who want to take 10 ship barns and not have to worry about losing 70,000 credits again, because it's fun. It's a fun stronghold. Allow that to be a game mode where you can just, be allowed to play your T69 in strongholds, because who wouldn't want to do that? So that's my idea. A fun stronghold would be good where anything goes, and it's not really taken competitively, because we've got all the tier 8 tryhards. Tarzan, formerly the god, tryhard in tier 8, and I'm like, well, I just want to make credits. Like, if I want to make credits, I'll just go play my fun stronghold. You can care about your tier 8 elo, I won't. In terms of global maps, potentially limit the amount of reward tanks, just like I said in strongholds. In terms of, I say this would go for both the gold campaign and the tank rewards campaign. Force a higher elo clan that has proven themselves to be strong on the first couple of days to fight on the different fronts and time zones. Obviously, we have the advanced front and the elite front. Maybe have it so a front of 1,000 to 1,200 elo clans, and then 1,200 to 1,400 elo clans. Maybe something like that. But they're allowed to fight on different fronts depending on their current elo. Obviously, people drop a lot of elo at the start of campaigns, but this could be based on your performance in the first couple of days, and it forces you to, otherwise it lessens your reward. Like, it lessens the amount of fame points you get per game. That was my idea. So different fronts, different time zones. Like, the elite front is good, but I remember in the last Renaissance campaign that a Cuckoo stayed on the basic front for literally the entire campaign, because they could easily defend Berlin against us. I say easily. They're all very close days, but they didn't want to risk when they could just easily farm tanks on the basic front. Maybe Wargaming should push it so they have to go fight on the advanced front, otherwise they don't get as many rewards. The other thing I said, the final point of this video, get rid of the fucking experimental modules. Nobody likes them, right? No. It's just, you do extra damage. Oh look, everyone's taking 60 TPs. Fun. Yay. Really good game. It's a competitive game mode. It's not who has the most experimental modules left. No, you don't use them. Or unless, the enemy team is going to use them, or they have like a set time zone where you can use experimental modules. That would maybe the only way that I would accept them being in the game, but honestly, they're just dumb. Like, a team that has experimental modules and takes mouse. I think we got beat last campaign on Berlin because the team just took mouses, 60 TPs, put experimental modules on. Like, we physically didn't have enough DPM to kill them. Like, it's not fair. Like, nobody likes it. Wargaming, just remove them. We already have enough problems with chiefs as it is, let alone chiefs that are faster and have more hit points. Yeah, that was my final point. There's a lot that I like about this game. There's a lot that needs to be changed about this game, and I don't want to go back through and summarize every single point I've made, because there's no point. But I want to do say, if you have made it this far, I know it's been over 2 hours of a video. It's more like a live stream at this point. I really, really do appreciate you listening, even if you listen just to a little bit, just to get the opinions. I appreciate it a lot. And let me know about any opinions that you found good, any opinions you have on the game, anything that you thought I said was controversial. Let me know in the comments, because I would love to make another one of these where I go through the comments and I look and I answer what people say and I give my thoughts and feedback on what other people have said. But yeah, as I said, thank you so much for watching. I know this has been an insanely long drag and probably very painful video to listen to, and I could have probably cut it down a little bit more, but I thought I'd get it all done in one video and really go off on a rant and join the hype train that is shitting on World of Tanks, because I feel like that a lot of these issues need to be addressed. And as I proved, there's 30 separate points, and it's taking me 2.25 hours to do this video, to record everything, because there aren't that many issues with the game. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Please do either like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you for some more World of Tanks content very soon. I'll also maybe do a video on F1 2020 in the same style as this. And yeah, I will see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching, and see ya.